Hello, 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 and welcome to Age Tech Innovators, the podcast where we explore how technology is transforming the way we care for our aging population. I'm Monty, your host, and each week we chat with inspiring leaders who are making a real difference in the lives of older adults, sharing innovations and ideas that help support and uplift those who need it most. Join us as we work together to build a brighter, more caring future for everyone. Now, let's dive in. So I am blessed to be with an amazing innovator and a good friend, Gary Clark. Gary, run me through who you are and what you do in 60 seconds.
Hello, Mon. Well, firstly, thank you for the inspiring leaders piece. I don't think I've ever been called an inspiring leader before, so that's a change. I am Gary Clark, as you rightly said. I am Careium's technical director. So basically, I support our product technical support team. We have around about 300,000 products globally, and also I'm responsible for innovation. I have a wife and two lovely young children. And that's me in a nutshell.
Boom. On the
Boom.
point. So straightforward, so concise as always. So I already know this personally, but I think our listeners would find this really curious. What inspired you to enter the age tech industry? How did you get into this space?
Interesting story. So I guess I have lived experience to a certain extent. My mother, God rest her soul, had a very progressive form of multiple sclerosis, and because of that very reason, she had a lovely tech box, shall we call it, an alarm unit that used to sit on the side of her mantelpiece, and she used to press a pendant that used to wear, she'd wear around her neck in the event of an emergency. Provided by the local council at the time, Harlow District Council, the Essex massive,
Big up.
and in the event that she needed help, she would use that pendant. Now, as a result of that, my dad, he worked for a recognised business in the industry as a service engineer for 25 years. And he joined another telecare business kind of following his 25 years with one of the largest. And he managed to kind of coerce my brother over to joining the very same business. He was an electrician at the time for a number of years. And as I grew up, I'd go to work with my dad and see the elderly and vulnerable, join him on the problems that he was trying to solve for these people. I was at the time in retail, in a completely non-technical role, but very much customer service bias. And one day he said, what do you think about potentially, joining the same market? And I said, well, I'd love to work, with the elderly and vulnerable and make a difference on a daily basis. So here I am, 19 years later, having, joined the same business as him and my brother after a year of him trying to get me on board. And I've never looked back since. I'm absolutely thrilled and blessed to be able to help improve people's lives on a daily basis through the technology that we provide.
I know that you're very professional in how you approach everything, and so, but I'm sure that people would be curious in how it's like to work with family. I work with my brother, and it's always an interesting one. How do you find working so closely with your dad and your brother?
I think when I look back at in the businesses that we've been in together, we've sat at many a dinner table and had a fairly stressful conversation about how the day's work has been. But I don't think now I would be working without them. To be perfectly honest, Mon, and you've probably been through the same situation yourself, in the sense that to be able to rely on people that you absolutely wouldn't know will do their very best, in the position that they've been, and they're very much dedicated to this industry like I have been. And we strive every day to make a difference and solve the problems that are presented to us. And whether they report to me or not, in work, it's very professional, and outside of work, it's probably not so much. But they're a fantastic member of my team, just like all of the other people that report to me as well. So it's fabulous to be able to work with them.
What was your actual progression in these 19 years?
So I came into the industry coerced by my father, and joined with no experience whatsoever as a trainee service engineer who was, supporting daily faults on telecare systems. And I guess in those sort of probably 10 years as a service engineer, I worked my way up from a trainee to a standard field service engineer, then to a senior engineer, and then to a point where I was supporting other engineers, delivering services or attending special faults. And that was incredibly rewarding. You walking into a situation that nobody else could solve, and you would come out the back of that ensuring that, the system was working across, 40 flats, the way that it should be, after having a technical issue. Yeah, then I moved on to a managerial position, and then I was involved in national training, for a fleet of 120 service engineers for a period of time, to which point, having been training for a couple of years, I then moved into a product development role, and I was involved in developing the industry's first end-to-end digital group living system, and spent 5 years doing so, and it's probably the most successfully delivered digital group living system on the market today, which is
Nice.
really, really a proud involvement of mine. And then I was moved over to Careium 2 years ago. So I've been with Careium 2 years as their technical director now. Driving A to D innovation and supporting our product team and our clients with their products that they have. So it's been a very varied 19 years, but I've had some really great managers that have obviously helped me progress in my career.
What are some of the things that you've learned from having so much, I guess, groundwork with this area or this industry? How does that feed into some of the decisions you make now? And how do you feel like if you didn't have that, life would be slightly more difficult in terms of actually making decisions?
No, you're absolutely right. And I guess being able to interact or have the experience to interact with those people on the other end of the service, equally understanding, what solutions they would have had delivered and, their needs and their requirements of a solution, moving forward, and seeing the type of environments that these systems and solutions are deployed into. I guess that's what's really helped me, and also having a number of good relationships with key people within the industry, whether that be communication suppliers, whether that be the TSA, whether that be other suppliers within the industry, other technology businesses, understanding and speaking to them on a regular basis, I think has really kind of helped my progression and my understanding of the industry, and positioned me probably quite well to understand what technology we should be working with and developing moving forward.
I really appreciate that. You mentioned that you've had some in the evenings, some conversations about some of the challenges and problems which are being faced and maybe supporting our growing population of elderly and vulnerable people. What are some of the key challenges you see that we face today as an industry in supporting this group of people?
I think that the digital transition has presented many challenges, whether that be reference to interoperability, whether that be data security and privacy, whether that be funding across the industry, because there's significant funding required to make telecare move on from an analog world to a digital world, or from a reactive service to a proactive service. So I think multiple challenges come with that transition. User experience and engagement, the user experience when they move to a digital-based system or product changes, and trying to ensure that they adopt that effectively is a challenge. There are many, I could probably name 10 off the top of my head, but ensuring that those clients are kind of engaged with during that transition, and solutions are co-produced, I think is half the battle. But funding's probably one of the biggest challenges, because councils and local authorities just don't have the capital to change, all of this technology, and in the time period that it takes.
It just popped into my mind that, so we're facing issues with funding, then there's the data security, and then there's just the general organizational change. I know that you do, and this isn't a plug about Yokeru, but I'm genuinely quite curious about what inspired you to really be on the front foot at Careium with using proactive services. I wasn't really planning on asking this question, but I know that we have so many constraints as an industry, and nothing to do with Yokeru, but just where did this mindset come from of let's actually try and force some change in the way that we think things are going?
It's always been, ever since I joined 19 years ago, it's always been a very reactive industry. If there is a problem, a client presses a button or, calls for help, and I think that everybody can see the value of proactive and preventative technologies, but it's about changing that business model to be able to introduce and operate that technology with your client base. And I think we, as a business, I guess a personal goal of mine was to try and ensure that any business that I'm, engaged with, makes, that change as early as possible, because you can see the benefits of it. But I think as a business, we couldn't carry on the way we were 2 years ago, with the scale of reactive services that we provided. We saw the complete benefit of Careium and the technology, that was surrounding that, we're now able to deliver, those services in scale, without burden, downtime. There's all sorts of benefits around, introducing that technology and operating on a daily basis. And I think that we wanted to be an innovator and also, head of that delivery.
I really appreciate that. And the transition that you've gone through as a business over the last couple of years has been so cool to see, and the position and perspective, at least from what I see in the market, of this transition's so awesome. You being so closely knit into what's happening, if you look, and you've been in this industry for 19 years, you have a good amount of evidence in how things have changed so far. Looking ahead for the next 10 years, where do you think technology will be? And do you think it's going to be an emphasis on how technology is going to transform? Or do you think it's going to be an emphasis on how just general procedures and processes, not so much technology, but the actual supporting processes, will cause the major transformation? Like, what do you think is happening in the next 10 years?
I'll be a lot greater. I know that for sure. But hopefully we've still got a relationship in 10 years' time. But from a technology and an industry point of view, I mean, I think we'll be a lot further ahead. The TSA are doing some fantastic work on, governance and, work, field, generation, etc. And, developing and delivering services. And, I think one of the key things that we'll see in the next 10 years is how people are using the data, from this technology that is derived in the market, and also from monitoring platforms, because, that insight, in combination with, potentially machine learning, AI, will absolutely be supporting that care delivery moving forward, and, reducing emissions to hospital. And, there'll be so much more insight and rich data about the clients that we are introducing that technology to, that it's going to be a different place to where it is now. And I'm really excited about that. Video, again, will be a technology that's probably going to be used a lot more in the future. We saw the use of video through the pandemic, and we saw the huge value of that technology. But I think we've stepped back a little bit because, we're quite a sociable, personable nation. And I think we found that, using that technology can be impersonable in some situations. But what we need to understand is that it's not practical, nor is it scalable to continue to deliver person-centric services all the time. Tech has to, be introduced there and can support that care delivery. And I think we'll reap the benefits and the savings as a result of introducing that type of technology.
That's an interesting topic, where we start to look at how the perception of current technologies is going to change, which allows it to be adopted in even a wider group of people. A good example is video surveillance, where right now there's still a big stigma, hence this uptake of remote monitoring, which uses thermals because it's not such high resolution of watching people. Do you think there's going to be a change, or even more of a change, in terms of the actual vulnerable person's perception on technology? So it's not that new technology will be entering so much, but it's more that it's going to be more welcomed because it's the value is seen, and maybe the people who are providing those technologies are seen as more supportive rather than just watching them like it's Big Brother. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it absolutely will change. I think we're still in a bit of a generation at this moment in time where there's an adversity to video technology. You're absolutely right. The kind of Big Brother sort of position. And I think that as we move forward into the future, certainly with the social care crisis that we have, it's not practical to deliver, personal services anymore, personal care services. To the ones that need it the most, absolutely. But there are other means and ways to deliver, care. And we've seen that through some of the video technology pilots that we've been sort of introducing with our customers. And, we've had some fantastic outcomes as a result of transitioning, those local housing authorities to kind of like a hybrid model of care delivery or a virtual care delivery. The savings that have been generated as a result of that, and the fact that it's still keeping those clients independent. They're still being checked upon, but it's almost like not a hands-off approach, but, a leaner way of delivering those services, and ensuring that those clients' well-being is still catered for, and you still understand that they're okay on a daily basis. Careium has given us a fantastic opportunity to deliver, well-being checks, medication reminders, etc. at scale. But the only slight downside to that is that you don't get to see the client on a daily basis, and in reality, you may be able to tell, the client's state of mind by, the way that they describe how they're feeling. But, if you can also see the way they're feeling and the state of their property, etc., that adds a lot of value in certain circumstances rather than knocking on their door and visiting them every single day.
What do you see from the pilots that you've been doing as being beneficial in changing the perception that the end user has about the technology? You're saying that you're doing some pilots, maybe they're adopting technology which a couple of years ago they'd think it's too much, it's too close to being monitored too invasively. How do you see we can change the perception of the service users in a positive way?
I think a lot of it comes down to the way we explain the services and the way that it's co-produced and the way that you interact with the service user. I think if it's explained and, it's delivered effectively, then there'll be less adversity to change. If they can understand how it will benefit them, not that, it's there just to keep a tab on your movements. It's there to ensure that your well-being is improved, and it's arm's length, but still there. I think that's the point. It's not, a physical visit every single day. It's, checking in to make sure that your well-being is okay and that you can stay independent. And I think that's the real way of ensuring that these technologies are adopted. Is there's no pressure in this. It's here to benefit you, and ensuring that feedback is gained throughout that process, and any changes or improvements can be acted upon quickly and swiftly as a result of the client's feelings, needs, etc.
You mentioned that there's a change in generation, and that we have one type of generation which is now being somewhat replaced by a newer generation. What do you see the trends are in how this newer generation are adopting technology? And can you dive into a little bit of detail about what this even means about this newer generation, this older generation?
I think as the newly retired come through, those newly retired and slightly younger elderly generation are used to the use of technology. We are seeing technology in our everyday lives now, whether it be Alexas, whether it be Ring doorbells, whether it be, cameras that, are monitoring your property, etc. Those friends and family are introducing those newer generation to this technology. And I firmly believe that generation now understand, the reason for utilizing technology to, improve well-being and to ensure that actually we don't get into a situation where every single hospital bed is blocked because, they need physical care. Whereas the older generation, I do think have struggled to adopt that technology, whether it's in the 80s or 90s. Don't get me wrong, there is some 80s or 90s that are using iPads and some technology, but they are less used to the use of these newer technologies that are on the market today, and probably don't necessarily see or understand the benefit, of utilizing tech, within this industry.
As we're seeing a transition from one generation to the next generation of service users, how does this inform your decision at Careium to be supporting maybe just currently is, at least in my mind, it's very much age tech. Is there an initiative or idea that it'll be starting to support the wider community of people as people become more open to adopting technology that supports them with their well-being?
Absolutely. I mean, our older population is growing for one thing. We look at where we were in 2022, and I think, in 10 years, forward to that, we're expected the elderly population to grow like 2 million. And, we have to understand as a product and monitoring provider that we have to potentially deliver care in different ways, whether that be moving towards kind of like a virtual wards type scenario, and monitoring, a greater range of sensors to support clients' well-being and recovery to ensure that we can, free up hospital beds, etc. I think we have to move towards that model because, tenders are demanding it, and our clients are demanding that we monitor different types of technologies now. It will be a health tech service. And, when I look at a monitoring centre 10 years from now, we will probably have trained, clinicians within the monitoring centre that will be able to triage some services before potentially passing it off to the emergency services. And there will be a lot more interaction from friends and family. I'm absolutely sure of it. And I'm really excited about that technology. We'll probably be utilising AI a lot more, for locating data, processes, procedures, etc., etc. It'll be a lot leaner from a technology point of view and a lot more streamlined from a service point of view, I think.
So interesting, you mentioned using clinicians to help with the triaging process. I was in the States last week and I was on a panel, and someone on the panel asked the whole group of, I think it's 80% of the connections, so 80% of the monitoring centers, or the largest monitoring centers in the US, and I think it was only 2 of these monitoring centers have clinicians.
Really?
But these 2 are very, very forward thinking in terms of how they do their approach. And so bringing more of this health care within the center means you can start to, as you say, apply for different tenders and start to compete in ways that currently can't be done.
Absolutely. And I think, we'll move to a model of focusing on the people who need it the most, but ensuring that, all of our clients' well-being is checked in upon. And data is going to get a lot more insightful, reporting, and dashboards that clients can keep abreast of to understand a little bit more about their client base. It's going to continually improve. And I keep hearing about a data set that can be utilized across the industry. And I think we're going to, be moving more towards, that type of situation. Whereas I would suspect that in the reactive services, the data that was gleaned from these devices, was not really insightful or data rich. So it's an exciting future, I think, in this industry. Certainly with the introduction of AI and robotics, I think.
What are some of the cool, because I know you're really, really clued in to what's happening from a product perspective. What are some of the cool things, you don't need to name specific businesses, but some of the cool things that you're seeing with new AI products or new robotics that you think are particularly interesting in this space?
I mean, there's a multitude of different things. The types of technology that we've got available to us now, whether it be Bluetooth, whether it be, smart home technologies like Zigbee, Z-Wave, etc. And the items that can be integrated into a simple piece of technology now, providing it's developed the right way, is going to provide us with so much more capability and insight. Whether that be, the future of a dispersed alarm, for instance, that, we actively sell to the market, could well be that, when a client gets up in the night, to go to the toilet, for instance, there's automatically a light that's paving their way to the bathroom. And that technology, is all delivered through a small piece of equipment, movement being monitored throughout the day, to, try and ensure that clients' well-being is understood, and that early prevention can be detected in that type of circumstance. So I probably find that, an innovator's home moving forward will have somebody, potentially a piece of machinery that's going to make a cup of tea and ensure that the client is fed, watered, etc., etc. I think it's a scary thought when you think about it, but it's absolutely the future. I mean, we've got got robots delivering food now, haven't we? I think somewhere in London. So
Yeah.
or other cities.
If we fast forward about 60 years and you wake up one day, you look down and you're suddenly surprised because you look down your arms and you've got really, really wrinkly hands, and you look in the mirror and you're super grey. You're an elderly man, maybe in your mid-90s.
What do you mean I am
What
now?
technology would... Yeah. It's only Monday afternoon.
I don't look it, but I am.
You've got a great skincare routine, if so.
Clearly.
What would you like your day to be like in your mid-90s from a tech perspective and just a general lifestyle perspective?
Oh, it's a really good question. I mean, I would like to ensure that, my friends and family are part of, my care delivery in my 90s, so that they can go about their day understanding that I'm, perfectly well. And equally, I'd love to have something that's making my dinner, making my tea, etc., to enable me to be more independent in my own home. I don't want to be in a care home when I'm 90 years old. I want to be in my own home, around my family and friends, and ensure that I've got, technology that can, support me in that journey until, the point where it can't support me any longer. So yeah, I guess that's my desire from a technology and probably an age perspective.
That's really lovely. It's so interesting to hear that. I think framing things to see ultimately what we want towards the end of our existence on this earth tend to put a nice perspective on what we're all working on. Because I think sometimes we can be, at least from my perspective, can be very focused on what new tech is being developed and actually overlook the even more intrinsic desires of humans, which is just to have connection and be healthy and happy.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Mon. And sorry, I was just gonna add there that it's not logical to just have the latest piece of shiny tech all the time. It's about having technology that actually meets your needs and is going to improve, your well-being. And I think that's really important because, we probably do it in our own lives where we go out and we buy the next, biggest iPhone, which, is X number of pounds, but is it actually satisfying our needs? Well, no, probably the most basic phone might do that. But I think that's the important thing moving forward, is to ensure that we've got services around us and products around us that are going to meet our needs, and ensure that, it will meet our needs when it changes is one of the other biggest things as well.
What conversations do you think are not being had which should be had? You mentioned that it's sometimes not about a new piece of technology, but it's around the supporting technology. It's about the supporting processes to help people. What are some of the things that you think, conversation-wise, the industry is avoiding or maybe not putting enough emphasis on because they're maybe overemphasizing new innovation and new technology?
I think this industry is a tough place to be at this moment in time because there's a lot happening. It's a bright place to be, but I think it's a tough place to be because of the as I mentioned earlier, the digital transition. Because with the funding gap, the social care gap that we have, the focus is probably more on about replacing what you currently have, and probably as cheap as possible. In some situations, I'm not saying that's all situations by any stretch of the imagination, but in many local authorities and councils' perspective, there's probably a lack of skills and experience, and there is also a lack of budget. And I think actually we should probably be thinking about what the future of a digital telecare service or tech service looks like, and incorporating that into some of our conversations or our business cases, which some probably aren't having a chance to do. And, just asking a simple question to a client of how we can support you further, and having that dialogue with the end user rather than making a decision about the end user's future with the product or service that you're going to be providing, I think is going to be huge for some, clients' well-being moving forward. can I have a product that meets my needs and my requirements rather than you selecting a product for me?
I think that's really, really valuable insight, which is maybe, so you're right, we're going through a huge change in the industry, but ensuring we don't lose sight of what comes after that and preparing so that it's not this change and then we reassess and then spend 6 months, a year trying to figure out and then implement. It's almost like it's a simultaneous workflow.
Yeah, and but it is difficult in the sense that, some of these, changes do bring new technologies. They bring new players to the market because we're very much a growing sector. And with that, then there's things like governance to tackle, interoperability to tackle, making sure you do it in the right way, making sure that, the data is secure, et cetera, doing it in a resilient way. It's, it brings all of those challenges. But what I would say is that the TSA, doing a fantastic job around kind of the governance, the interoperability piece, and really ensuring that, technology-enabled care is really on the map, for the sector moving forward.
Yeah, I think the part that they'll have to play is going to be huge as the population grows, and also the offerings is not going to be just towards elderly people, but just to all vulnerable people. So it's going to be a crazy market. My last question, and I can't believe time's gone so quickly, as is the way with all our conversations. My last question is, you've been in the sector for 19 years, your family very much within the sector, so you have a really good idea about what technology is being used and what initiative works. What encouraging advice would you offer to listeners considering either starting a new business and bringing it into the sector, or pursuing a career within the sector with someone like yourselves? What encouraging advice would you give?
I think when anybody, comes out of, whether it be, sixth form or college or university now, my advice to anybody would be do something every day that makes an impact on people's lives. Whether that be improving their well-being, whether that be, you finding what your meaning is behind the job that you do. This industry in particular is growing, and technology is going to play a huge part in the well-being of, the elderly and vulnerable moving forward. And even in spaces like learning disabilities, etc., technology can support, those surrounding sectors as well. And it's going to play a huge part in the evolution of care. And I think it's in that sense, it's a really, really exciting to be. And I think the reality is probably very much like fire and security now. Technology-enabled care should probably have a verified certification or a college course that is associated to it that, people can join, undertake, and understand what their career looks like in that sector. And the younger generation should, I feel, embrace this sector now because, it's very much moved to a more technology, future kind of driven industry.
It's really, really amazing to be part of this sector at this time. And I'm really appreciating working with people who are so forward thinking and also so caring. It's a very caring sector.
It absolutely is. And, for you to be able to turn around and say, potentially you work in a sector where technology or services are supporting people like your grandparents, your story, for instance, with your grandmother. I mean, that's not something you can say in the jobs that you were, in every day. So
it wasn't so applicable for my time as a tennis coach. I'll tell you that story.
Well, I used to play tennis as well, so we should definitely have a game one day.
You're on.
I'd smash you. I'd absolutely smash you. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's an industry, it's like the emergency services. I mean, that is a sure, rewarding role to be in every single day. And I think this industry is very much fast becoming, like sectors like that. And I'm personally proud to be a part of it.
So I have no other questions, but is there anything top of mind? I know you mentioned you had some thoughts before coming into this. Is there anything you think is we'd like to unpick in the last minute or so? Or are you feeling, how are you feeling? Are you feeling like we've run through enough?
I'm feeling invigorated by the conversation for sure. And I mean, I'm interested to hear actually how, what you would say, what encouraging advice would you give? I know this was about asking me questions, but, I'm interested in to see what your response would be to, potentially younger people that might look to join an industry like this.
Podcast becomes the podcasted, I think, in this situation. What would I say to people who are looking to start something in supporting to people? I'd say to anyone who starts their own business, if you don't have a strong reason as to why you want to do it, then it can be a very, very, very long and tiring journey. But if you have a strong why, which is supporting people, because I think people just need more support in life, then all of the setbacks are actually very, very small stepping stones towards a greater vision. So I would say, before doing anything, figure out why you want to do it and remind yourself of why on a regular basis. And I think in the healthcare space, I remember I read a book when I was at university, I can't remember which one it was, talked about once you get to a certain amount of money per month, then any more money that you make incrementally doesn't improve your baseline happiness. As soon as you can cover costs and you can cover just general life, then anything you do to make any more money doesn't actually impact your life. And so then you get to the stage of this area of how do I reassess and do stuff that has an impact or has a positive benefit to the world. And if I can, and my advice would be try and get something that does both from the start, which is obviously try and make money, but do something in simultaneously that helps people. I think it's also maybe the same with you as well, where as soon as you enter into this space and you hang out with people who are in this space who are doing it because they care, and you help people and you see a material outcome of this person got help 5 hours earlier. As soon as you do that, and if you go and try and work in a different sector, like if you go in banking or finance or insurance or really anything, it feels really empty and transactional. And I feel like as soon as you taste it once, there's a reason why most people who come into the sector don't leave. What are your thoughts on that?
You're absolutely right, and I think that you build a real passion for what you do in this sector, and you really care about the people that you are deploying these services to, and the products that you deliver. And some of my favourite times working, in these 19 years has been where I've visited, a client, or I've spoken to a client on the phone and got their feedback about something that's not gone quite right for them, or get some feedback about the service that you're providing, because they're the most valuable pieces. Is understanding how that service that you've been involved in developing or delivering is actually working in reality, and how can we improve it to make that much more of a difference to their lives. And product development, whether it be technical support, whichever line of work you're in this industry, installing alarms, that interaction with the end user is probably the best part, I would say.
I know we are running over, but I'm just really grabbing the opportunity to chat to you and ask you questions. I hope that's okay.
Absolutely. I love talking to you, Mon, so it's a pleasure.
So the UK is an interesting spot because we're going through a big transition right now. There's a lot of innovation happening in places like Israel, in the US, in the Nordics, and I know that Careium has multiple branches in the Nordics. Where do you look to outside of the UK for good examples of innovation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, when you look at the Nordics and other European countries, some of those countries have made the switch to digital a lot before us. We're actually quite behind in the UK in that circumstance. So we've been able to glean quite a lot of knowledge and experience off of those countries and nations that have made that switch. But it varies very much from region to region. For instance, France probably are not quite as established in digital telecare.
Pretty cool. Appreciate that. It's nice to have a bit of insight into alternative markets, especially because you're grounded in so many. Gary, can't believe it. It's gone so quick. I just want to say, yeah, huge thank you. Yeah, honestly, I really appreciate your time and I look forward to catching up soon. And thank you for your insights and your contribution as always. Likewise. All right, I'll catch you in a bit. Peace. Bye bye.